Hi guys, so today what we're going to be doing is going over MaxMSP Jitter, and specifically we're going to be creating some visual effects work. We're going to create our own video mixer using various components from Vizzie and from Jitter. So let's get started. As you can see, I've got my Max brand new patch open, and one thing I wanted to show you on the desktop was this folder that I created called Max Movies, and inside of that folder Max Movies, I've got 5 movies that I've actually downloaded from the internet. So I used QuickTime to capture some visualizations, and actually have 6 altogether, as you can kind of see here, that I thought were cool, and then I put them in a Max Movies folder. So in order to actually have Max read those, before we get started, let's go ahead and just go to the option File Preferences and make sure that you've added this user path to that new folder that has all your movies in it. So I'm going to just select this and hit minus so you can see how I did it. I went ahead and hit the plus button and I chose that folder, which is on the desktop, as you can see, Max Movies, and I hit open. And that allowed this path to be one of the paths that's being used when Max first opens up. It's really important. This won't work without going ahead and getting that started. So let's get started. What we're going to be doing today is just reading one of those movies. So we're going to start with a new patch, N for new, and we're going to actually use jit.mov IE as our first function. Now this patch jitter.movie actually just plays back a movie, and if you option click on the jit.movie patch, you'll open up the help file. And what I'd like you to do is unlock the patch by command clicking on the background and just selecting everything up here, copying it, and then closing this help file down and then pasting, because we're going to need a couple of these things. We won't need these guys, so we'll just delete these. But we will need this play bar, which we will then plug into the jit.movie, and we will need a file to read to see if things are working, and we're going to plug that into the first inlet for jit.movie. Now when you click on the read with the command click, you'll see that the movie's playing right away, but we don't see any movie physically here because we haven't actually created a window for it, a movie window. So let's make a new patch, N for new, and we'll type jit.p patcher window, and this creates a little movie window where we can actually see that chicken movie that we just created. Now you'll notice that this movie is got a little green cord. We talked about this in class. This says it's a matrix that we're sending to this patcher window. And we talked about the fact that in order for this to function more quickly with music and other things that you're going to be using, we want this actually be something that's not a matrix, but in fact a projection or a surface or a texture. And so in order to do that, we're going to need to add an attribute to jit.movie. We're going to type at, which is an attribute, and we're going to type output underscore texture, and then we're going to set it to 1. 1 means we're going to be turning that on. The minute we do that, you'll see that the cord turns blue now, and that means that we're working with textures and we're actually processing this video on the GPU. Now, one problem with textures is that until we have some place to project onto, this window is going to be stuck. It's going to be frozen. You can see nothing is actually working, and it says we need an OpenGL context. So let's go ahead and give Max what it wants. We're going to create a new patcher, N for new, and this time we're going to type jit.world, and we're going to create a world in order to project this movie onto. So we're going to go ahead and link this to the world area here, and in order for us to see this world, you can kind of see the floating window here. We're going to have to turn the world on with a toggle. So let's hit T for toggle, attach that to jit.world, and then turn it on. And now we have the movie playing again, and you'll see in the background we also have this floating window that shows us that the movie is in fact playing. Now the jit.world has a couple of attributes that are really important for it, and so we're going to go ahead and add those in right now, just so that we can see those. And as you know, you can always look for the attributes by selecting the object here and seeing what attributes are enabled. The two that we're going to use right away are just going to be full screen enable. We're just going to drag that in, and then we're going to use the float. The Jit.world is selected. There it is. All right, so these are the two things that we're going to be plugging into our Jit.world area here. Now you can see the toggle for floating. If I click that on, this window will now be floating on top of our screen, as you can kind of see. And the nice part is if I click back on this patcher, the window won't go behind the patcher, which means that it'll be floating in front. If I have that unchecked, you'll see it goes to the back and it's hidden, so I'm just going to have that on. Now the full screen is a toggle which allows us to go full screen. We're not going to introduce that yet. We're going to create a little keystroke combination in order for us to take advantage of that full screen window. But so far we've got a little movie and it's playing. Let's see if we can pick up one of the movies that we created. The movie was called 1.mov, so we're just going to type 1.mov, and I'm going to click on it, and you'll notice that that movie that I wanted to have read in fact is working, and you can kind of see that we're seeing the waves. Let's go ahead and pull in the other 5 movies or 6 movies. So we'll just option drag this to create multiples, and let's just move this out of the way and option drag to get a couple more. I'll just move this over here so we can read all 6 of our movies. So let's do 1, let's do number 2, let's do number 3, and you know you can probably, if you're a MaxMSP user, you know you can probably pre-fill all this stuff out using prepends and pens and change this message so it's dynamic based on how many movies you have. We're going to plug all of these in just manually into the Jit.movie window here, and we're going to make sure that things are working just by clicking on them. And you'll notice that if I click on these, I am in fact reading all 6 movies on the desktop. And as you can kind of see, the floating window has that as well. So if I go full screen, I get that movie, and I can make that smaller. So it would be nice if we could just bang these using our controller keyboard or our Midi keyboard, and we can. If we actually hit a bang or put a bang into these will actually read. So B for bang. So I'm just click back here, hit B, and I'll just make this a little bigger so I can see it, and then I'm just going to attach this here, and I'm just going to make 1. I'm option dragging, by the way, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And I'm just going to attach these here. So far, so good. That means that when I click on these little guys, it will actually bang that movie if I click on these. So you can see that'll click number 6, that clicks number 5, that clicks number 4. Now, what I'm going to do now is go down here to the Assign MIDI Map button, and I'm going to turn this on, and I'm going to enable all of these objects for mapping. So I'm just right-clicking on it, and what's happening is that bang is now this bang is ready for me to push a button or a MIDI note on my keyboard. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to push the first button, and boom, there it picks up, and then I'm going to select this one. I'm going to push my second button or key on the keyboard, and I'm just going to go through and actually map all my keys to these buttons. And now I've got all the buttons selected and they're working. I'm going to turn this MIDI mapping off, and I'm just going to push the buttons on my keyboard to see if this is actually working. And you can see I'm not using the mouse. I'm using either the keyboard, MIDI keyboard, or I'm using buttons on the controller. Now you'll see, I'm just going to move this over. I'm going to put this in the back for a moment. Oops, sorry, wrong button. Now we can see. If you click down here, you can see that all 6 of these buttons were assigned a controller button when I did that MIDI mapping. So if you're ever unsure about what buttons are where, it shows you which controller buttons are. So just so you know, I wanted you guys to see that. Okay. So we can put this back on top, and here we go. So now I have something that allows me to change the movie on a button click, which is really nice. So if the movie is getting boring, I just hit the button, and there you go. Let's go ahead and automate this a little bit more. So what we're going to do is take these buttons and just kind of move them aside here. And I'm going to option drag these little guys and just align these chords so it looks really pretty. You can kind of see how that works. And what I'm going to do is make a new function, and I'm going to call this one random. And because we want some random stuff to happen, I have to tell it how many different possibilities there are. There are 6 possibilities. And if you've used random in the past, I'm going to do M for messenger, and I'm going to show you what random bangs out. I'm going to hit a B for bang, and I'm just going to bang this random a bunch of different times. And you can see that the numbers are between 0 and 5. That means if the number is, if that's 6 possibilities altogether, obviously. So 0 counts as 1. That's why it's always 1 less than the number you put here. Sometimes that's confusing to people, especially if you're expecting the number here to be the actual number in order to read the number 6. But in this case, we really don't care too much, because what we're going to be using is a routing function to route the different inputs to bang those different buttons. So we're just going to hit N for new function, and then we're going to type ROUTE. I don't know how the cap locks got pushed. And then we're going to route the 0 first, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that'll give us a set of routing, and we're going to put each one of these into an individual bang. Now these bangs can be hit by a note, but they can also be hit by this route object. And now I'm going to type or put the random into the route, and I'm going to test it out and see in fact that the random is in fact just bouncing around randomly on these little buttons here. So in order to make this kind of automated, we're going to just do a metro object, and we're going to play each movie for like 20 seconds before banging. So instead of just using this simple bang up here, let's go ahead and add a metro object. So new object, metro. And we're going to set the time to 20,000, so 20,000, which is 20 seconds. And I'm going to plug that into my bang, and I'm just going to take this away. And in fact, you can start this just by clicking this little button here, or you could use a toggle, T for toggle, and then turn that on and off. That's another way of getting a metro to work. You can have that now turned on, and you'll see as soon as I turn this on, the metro bangs, it picks a random number from 1 to 6, and then that's what we're seeing for 20 seconds. And then in about 5 more seconds or 7 more seconds, you're going to see another bang, and this movie is going to change into something else. So we've now got an automated system, as well as the ability to, as you see, it's just changed, as well as the ability to physically just push a button like I just did, like this, and then this allows us to control what's coming out either way, so randomly or with a button push. Okay, let's move some stuff around. I'm going to move this window out of the way for a second, and I'm going to open this up a little bit so we can see what we're doing. Let's just give us a little more room, and I'm going to zoom out a little bit, so Command minus just once. What I want to do is, I've got this nice routing set up here, and I would love to have all this stuff hidden into one little area. Oh, you notice that I've missed one here, so we'll never see that movie if I didn't see that lightning movie. If the number comes in, the number between 0 and 5, into this area, it's going to read one of these 6 movies. And then what's going to do, it's going to push that into the movie file, and then it's going to show us what's going on here. There's this play bar that automatically starts the playing at the beginning when you hit the read button, and then it comes out and goes to our projector, our world projector. What I'd like you to do is select all of these guys right here, and what we're going to be doing is we're going to go to Edit and Encapsulate. And what happens is when you do that, everything that we selected gets put into a subpatcher. And we're going to call this, let's see, we'll call it 6 movies. And so we know now that inside of here, if we send a number in here between, as you can kind of see, between 0 and 4 or 5, what's going to happen is it's going to bang in here and then come out and play on our projection here. I'll put this in front again. So if I hit the buttons, you can kind of see that allows me inside of this window to do something to like manually control it. Whereas the Metro here allows us to, every 20 seconds, it's automatically going to change. So let's go ahead and duplicate this by option dragging it. And now we have two movie players, right? One is being banged randomly, and the other one is just kind of holding out here. Let's see what's coming out of both of them. So I'm going to type N for new, and then I'm going to type JIT dot P window, just so I can see what's coming out. And I'm going to just option drag that so I can see what's coming out of this one. So what's coming out of this one, we see it here, and that makes sense because it's all plugged in here. But what's coming out of this one is nothing so far. But if we hit our numbers, you'll notice that the numbers only affect this side. So let's go ahead and plug this random in on this side, and I'm going to take the random off of this side. So now that the random should be banging randomly only on the right hand side. The left-hand side is still manually controllable, as you can see, just by me pushing buttons left and right. But the right-hand side is only going to change every 20 seconds. So at this point, what's really nice is that we could use a mixer to mix this stuff together. And this is where we're going to get into something called Vizzie. At this point, I'm going to have you guys open up the Vizzie bar by clicking on the little V here. And I want you to notice that the inputs so far and the outputs are, and mix composition and generate and effects, all these have different functions. But we're going to start with something called the mix composite. And we're going to do a basic fader. So it's called an X fader, and I'm just going to drag this in, and I want you to see this Vizzie object. And what it's looking for are two video sources, and it has a little button here, a crossfader, and then it outputs this video to something. So let's go ahead and unhook this just by deleting it. Plug the two movie player elements into the video 1 and video 2. I want you to notice that I didn't come out of the patcher window because it's green. This will not function, so be really careful not to go out of the bottom of your patcher window. Instead, what you're going to be doing is going directly out of your movie player, because this is a texture file. Finally, we're going to go into our JIT world. And what I want you to do now is just physically lock the patch and move this little slider here. And you'll notice that if you move it to the right, you see the movie on the right. And if you move it to the left, you see the movie on the left. And if you hit the buttons, you can see that you can, in fact, change the different elements here. And you'll notice that when you hit the button, the movie kind of starts over. And you can see that you can see both movies at the same time if the crossfade is at 50%. Now it would be really nice if we could use a controller to control this, and so what we're going to do is unlock our patch, and we're going to go up here to our sliders area, and I'm just going to pick this slider. I could have just hit the letter S to create this slider as well, and what I need to do is feed this slider into this area right here in order to control this crossfade. All Vizzie objects require a number between 0 and 1. So you're going to need to make this slider a float slider. So let's go ahead and go over here to our window. And I'm just going to move this here so you guys can see what I'm doing. And if you click on the slider and you go to the bottom here, you're going to notice that there's a value area. And this allows you to set this slider up so that it feeds out numbers the way you want it to. I'm going to hit the M for message, and I'm going to show you currently the slider gives us the numbers 0 to 127, and that is because here on the values area we have the range 0 to 128, with an output multiplier of 1. And notice that the float is not checked. That means that there's no decimals. So let's go ahead and check this float option to give us some decimals. And we know that the highest number we want is the number 1, and the output multiplier is 1. So the minimum is 0, output, and the range is 1 with an output multiplier of 1. That means it'll multiply. It won't be multiplying anything because 1 times whatever is the same number. Now if I move this slider up, you'll see that the message box shows me that there is in fact a decimal that goes from 0 to 1. So if I now plug this slider into this X fader and move it, you'll notice that it does in fact control this little crossfader. And you're like, well, why aren't we just using this little dial? Well, because we're going to be mapping this to our slider on our keyboard or on our Midi controller. And we'll do it the same way we did with the buttons. We're going to go to the Assign Midi map here by turning it on. We're going to right-click on that slider and enable that for Midi mapping. And what I'm going to do now is just move my slider on my controller. And it automatically picks this up. And now I'm going to turn this off. And now I have the ability with a slider to fade between different images. So you can kind of see we'll need 2 different ones, obviously. But you can see I can fade the fish in on the first one and then to the... and I'm doing this all through my Midi keyboard. And I still have the buttons able to click on different things so that you can kind of see how this works. And so everything is working. So we have a 2-channel or a 2-video mixer here that allows us to control one of the channels with buttons. And it allows us to use our first slider to crossfade between these 2 things. Okay. Very nice. Let's continue on. I'm just going to leave this as a group. What I want you guys to notice down here is this bunch of different things here. Jit.world. We have a world object here. We have full screen. I'm going to simplify this this world. I wanted you guys to see how to do this manually. And if you wanted to get help on Jit.world and you hold the Option key down to open it, you'll see a fuller explanation of what this world has and how to set it up. But for now, what I want you guys to do is go into the Vizzie area, and instead of the Jit.world, what we're going to do is we're going to go to the Output tab, and I'm going to pull in a projector. So let's go ahead and do that. Now what you'll notice when you do this is that you get 2 different, you'll get another window along with your original window with the number, and this one is called projector and it has a number on it. This projector will be replacing this entire set of things. So I'm just going to select all of this and delete it. And then I'm going to put my video into the projector, and I'm going to turn on the floating window so you can in fact see that this does nothing more than what we've already done before, right? And the nice part about knowing what we had before is that when you actually open this patch to take a look, because these patches are just are nothing more than jitter patches that have been encapsulated to make them look pretty. But if you right click on this and you go to object and then you open the original Vizzie thing, and then you unlock the patcher mode, what you're going to see, just going to put this down here out of the way so you can see, is what you're going to see is something. I'm going to unlock this so we can see it and zoom out a little bit. You can see that in essence all it is, as you can see here, is a jit.world object, just like what you had before, with a bunch of different attributes, the full screen, a bunch of different little things here to make life easier, the name of the object, projector, right? All these things are kind of what we did initially, but I wanted you to be able to do this just in case you needed to, not rely necessarily on these objects the way they are. Okay, so we have a projector, and if we show the window and we allow it to be floating, it'll be there the whole time. So let's do something a little bit more interesting with with some of this stuff. We've got our fader set up, okay, but what we can do is go into Vizzie, and what I'm going to do is go to the let's see, transform area, And notice that there's a lot of different things we can do to transform the video. I'm going to select kaleidoscope or collider. And as you can see, it wants a video to be pulled in, and then what it's going to give us is something totally different. Now, just go ahead and select this chord and hold the shift key down, and what we're going to do is we're just going to drag this over this chord, and then I'm going to show you how that kaleidoscope kind of functions, right? You can see, if I lock the patch, that you've got a little bit of an offset possible, and you have an invert or regular mode possible, and then you've got like a fold, warp, and scale mode possible. So if you wanted to use a slider to control these two things, you would put the slider input here. Remember, all the Vizzie objects require a 0 to 1. Since we already created that slider, all we have to do is duplicate it just by option dragging it. And the nice part about option dragging these sliders is that when I move my Midi controller, you notice how these sliders are different. They haven't been set to any of our sliders on our keyboard. So only the first one is actually going to control this. The rest of these can be used to control these buttons or this button. Or you can even use it to control the mode just by clicking on one of these. And you'll notice that different numbers will cause this to switch over at a different time. And knowing what these numbers are by maybe putting a message here and then saying, okay, if I wanted something like scale to be something that was on, or if I wanted warp, I would have to feed it this number, which is like 0.5. So you could always create a message and just put 0.5, right? And then plug this in here. So say it was set to fold, you just bang that and now it's back to scale, or in this case 5.9. Let's see if that was the right number, or maybe it was 4.4. There. So 0.49, and you can see now it changed to wrap. So you can kind of get all these preset the way you like them with a load bang, and you know that a load bang will initiate when the patch opens. It'll bang all these numbers into these things, so you can kind of have it all preset. Okay, so assuming that that's the kind of mode we want, you can kind of see the projection is pretty interesting. You can actually cascade these different effects. So let's go ahead and add another effect. And I'm just going to hit some buttons so you can see how changing the different images or videos here changes the nature of this kaleidoscope. And remember, you could put an X fader underneath this and have different things, you know, fading in from one thing to another, or even mixing them. So let's try one more interesting Vizzie object, like fractalizer. And we're just going to put that here. And what we're going to do this time is we're just going to take whatever's coming out of our X fader and put it in here. And now I'm going to just make a new jit.p window just to temporarily to see what this is doing for me. And you can kind of see that's giving us this mono like dotty thing that allows us to kind of pull the video apart and squeeze it together in a very interesting way. So, and I can try different things like color tint, which is really nice. So if I were to take this fractalizer and put it in ahead of kaleidoscope, I'm curious what would happen, right? And this is the nice part about, I'm just going to command minus a little bit so we can see what we're doing. Let's just pull this down. So I'm just going to unlink this here, unlink this, and I'm just going to hold my shift key down, put this on the line and let go. And now all of a sudden you see we've got something really interesting happening because this video is pushing out something like this, and then when it goes into the kaleidoscope, it gets another offset or another element added to it. So in this way you can create some really abstract videos, right? And again, these will allow you to modify these sliders. If they're set between 0 and 1, you can then modify these things to your liking. So for instance, if I wanted to put this one in here and this one in here, you can see it's kind of working nicely. And if I want to set these up to be mapped, all I have to do is come down here, select this one, and then assign that to a new controller, and then select this one and assign that to another slider on my controller, and then turn that off. And now I have 3 sliders, the first one, the second one, and the third one. And you can kind of see how you can build up some really interesting visualizations. And finally, if you want to go full screen, you're going to just hit the full screen button. Now I'm not going to do it because we're recording the screen with Adobe with QuickTime, and if I hit escape for QuickTime, it'll stop the recording. So I can't go full screen, but in essence, this is also not taking up any CPU cycles for your MaxMSP. This is all being done on the graphics card, so it's very quick, but also allows you to continue to work with your music patch. I hope this has been a little bit helpful. In the next tutorial, what I'll try to do is show you how to automate some of these things using oscilloscopes and some of the other functions. You can use audio amplitude to make these things move and really get some dynamic stuff that you do not need to worry about while you're actually performing. It's just going to be some visualizations that are happening. And I just want to remind you that what we're really seeing here, if I were to, I'm just going to modify this by making a duplicate. And this is the original image that's coming out of the crossfader. Just so you can see, they've got the lightning here, and I've got fish. Going into the fractalizer, it does this, and then coming into the kaleidoscope element, it does this and comes out of our projector. And so in this way, what we've done, and again, we can use our buttons to modify the imagery manually, or we can actually do it using our randomization here automatically, so that this will always be something different and new. Hope this helps, and look forward to seeing what you guys do for your own patches.